If you're a small business owner looking to grow or expand your business, check out On Deck Business Loans. On Deck offers business loans online from $5,000 to $500,000, and their simple application process only takes 10 minutes. Unlike banks, they'll give you a decision quickly, and funding is as fast as one day. Get a free consultation with an On Deck loan advisor. Visit ondeck.com/podcast.
This is the Breakfast Leadership Podcast. Boundaries or burnout, you make the choice. Here's your host, Michael Levitt. Welcome to the Breakfast Leadership Show. It's Michael here, and I have a New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and USA Today best-selling author, as well as the host of the Do It Scared podcast, Ruth Soukup. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Awesome for you to be here, and I love chatting with you. You have a new book out, Do It Scared, and I've read it, and as I talked to you in the pre-show, there's a section in there about procrastinators, and I've always identified as someone that was not a procrastinator, and then after I read that section, I had a realization of actually I am. So talk about the book and, how it came together and some of the, things that you found out, while you're writing the book about yourself and obviously about how this, pertains to entrepreneurs and people out there that, are kind of apprehensive about doing some great things in their life.
Yeah, well, that's a big question, but I'll do what I can to answer it. So first of all, how I got interested in this topic, just of fear and how specifically, not all fears, I'm not talking about the fear of spiders or the fear of flying, specifically the fear that I was interested in talking about and exploring in this book is the type of fear that holds us back, that internal fear that keeps us from going after our goals and dreams. And how I got interested in that was just because I started to notice a theme happening so often in the members of my community. I have this huge community of women at Living Well, Spending Less that are more interested in finding solutions for their home to spend less time on the things that they have to do, so there's more time for the things they want to do. And then I have another whole community, and there's a little bit of overlap, but I have another whole community of entrepreneurs who are building their online businesses. But I really noticed in both of these different communities where I talk a lot about setting goals and going after your dreams and being productive, the thing that kept coming up a lot over and over and over again, and maybe you see this too, was this idea of just feeling like something was holding them back. I have people come and say this to me almost every day. Ruth, you talk about going after your goals and dreams, but I feel so stuck, or I feel so overwhelmed, or I just feel like I'm sitting on the sidelines of my life and everybody else is jumping in, but I don't dare to jump in. I don't dare to go after this stuff like you say to. And it was not just one or two people. It kept coming up again and again. And it got me thinking, because I realized that I've dealt with a lot of fear in my own life, both in my personal life and also in my journey as an entrepreneur and building my business. And, every step of the way, it has felt terrifying. And yet I have really worked to overcome that. And so I started wondering, what is this fear that holds us back? And does it look the same for everyone? Is it universal? Do we all feel afraid? But why do some people push past their fear and some people not? And what can we do about it? And so I started asking a lot of questions, and you've got to watch out when you start asking questions because you never know what you're going to find. But we ended up doing this huge research study of over 4,000 people. And it was so much data that we had to hire a whole team of researchers and psychologists to help us dive through the data and make sense of it all. But through the end of it all, what we discovered was really fascinating and also has been so helpful for so many people. And that's sort of the jumping off point for the book. And we can talk about that. But the biggest takeaway from all of that research was that not all fear is created equal, but there are these very clear, distinct patterns in the way that fear manifests itself for people's lives, which we call the 7 fear archetypes. And it's really important to identify those, because that's when you can start to do something about it.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I loved about the book was how you could look at those 7 archetypes and I can identify with each of them to a certain extent throughout my life. And, some, again, were more prevalent than others. And, as I said before, I never thought that I was a procrastinator, but then, I went after reading that section and I realized, actually, yeah, there's some tendencies there. I mean, the people pleaser one, I know for a fact that was definitely one of those things that I had dealt with earlier in my life. And I thank / blame my parents for that. And because I saw some tendencies of what they did. And a lot of the things that they did were driven from the environment that they grew up in, with my mom, post, World War II, era type of thing. And, living in an area that wasn't very affluent. So a lot of struggle and challenges and things like that. And it's easy to fall into those, those things. And like even chapter 7, the pessimist, one of my favorite quotes is from former Detroit Pistons head coach Chuck Daly. Now he was coach when they were winning all of their championships before Michael Jordan decided that was enough and he wanted to win them all in Chicago. So, but Chuck, there was a game that the Pistons, I forget who they were playing, but they beat the team pretty soundly, like 20, 25 points or something like that. And at the end of the game, he's talking to the media and he's complaining and moaning about all the mistakes that they made. And finally, a reporter said, Chuck, you won by like 30 points. Why are you so pessimistic? And he said, a pessimist is an optimist with experience. And it's one of those quotes that have stuck with me. I find it funny. I tend to be more optimistic in life, but I can understand why pessimists tend to, seek, that thing. But sometimes they hold on to it too hard and they basically miss a ton of opportunities and miss out on life because they're so focused on what could go wrong instead of what could go right.
Yes. And, that's funny that you say that exact quote, that it's an optimist with an experience, because often for the pessimist, where that actual fear archetype comes from more than any of the other archetypes is from a place of having experienced pain or adversity or some sort of trauma or some sort of hardship in their life. And it gets them stuck in a place of feeling like, why should I even bother? So the underlying fear there for the pessimist fear archetype is a fear of pain or a fear of adversity. And it gets them stuck in that place of thinking, I've already experienced hard stuff and I know it's just going to happen again. So I'm not even going to try.
And that's one of those things in life when you actually take the opportunity to pay attention to what's going on in your life and adversity. I faced it, on several occasions. Some of it, the public would declare pretty significant and severe. But when you go through those things, if you're aware of those and you understand, like you said, things are going to happen again. There's going to be issues and problems and challenges and you name it. Knowing that they will happen, not being afraid of them happening, but understanding that's just how the cycle of life can go. It takes, at least from my perspective, it takes the sting away a little bit. It doesn't impact you anywhere near as much as it did earlier in my life because you just know, okay, this is going to happen. How do I navigate around it or through it and come out the other side to where I want to be?
Absolutely. That's actually a really good point. And something I could point out about the archetypes is that they can definitely change over time and they can evolve, and the ones that are affecting you most prevalently right now might not be the ones that, it doesn't have to always be that way. They're actually kind of scored on a continuum. And we do have an assessment that you can take on our website at doitscared.com that will show you, what your percentage is. And so for most people score at least something on all 7 of them. You have a little bit of every single one of the fear archetypes within you. But for most people, what we found is most have either 1 or 2, sometimes even 3 that are most prominently affecting you and impacting your life the strongest. And so as you start to learn about the different archetypes, you can usually sort of identify yourself in one, like how you said, I really identified with the procrastinator, but I also identified a little bit with the people pleaser. And that's very typical because it works on a continuum, and the way that these different fears work together is sort of your unique combination is what makes up your unique fear fingerprint. And the reason why this is so important is because so much of this fear that happens in our life happens subconsciously beneath the surface without really realizing what's happening, that it's happening, or that even that it's fear. We don't necessarily recognize it as fear. Sometimes we call it anxiety. Sometimes we call it feeling stuck. Sometimes we just call it depression. Sometimes we just call it, this is just the way I'm wired. This is just the way I'm built. And what we experience it as is our truth. This is our truth. This is how I am. Isn't everybody this way? And the thing about that is, as soon as you can start to shine a light on it and bring those behaviors out into the open and start to identify them and identify the way that fear is actually affecting you and possibly holding you back, that's when you have the power to start doing something about it. Because it's sort of like going to the doctor. You go to the doctor and you say, hey, doc, I don't feel good. How are you going to help me? I need you to help me. And he says, well, okay, let me run some tests. I got to figure out what's wrong, because it could be a stomach ache. It could be appendicitis. It could be cancer. Those are three very different things with very different treatments. And fear works the same way. Until you have that diagnosis, you can have no cure. But once you've seen it and once you're seeing it, that's when all of a sudden the whole world opens up, because you can go, oh my gosh, now I know how to do something about this.
And that's crucial. And, one of the things you highlight again in the book is when you're trying to determine, which of these seven, the combination. And I definitely highly recommend people do the assessments so they get a clearer picture. But you focus on getting feedback from others, because sometimes we think we know ourselves, but those that are closest to us know us better than we do in many things. And it would be really interesting to hear your take and your findings on what that was like, as far as soliciting feedback from others to get a grip as to where you are and things.
As far as getting other people's feedback for determining your own fear archetype, or
yeah, that, and also accountability, and
right,
the changes.
Well, I think one of the things that's so helpful about accountability is that your friends, especially the people that are willing to give you true accountability. Now, true accountability can be hard to find because it's based in trust and vulnerability and allowing yourself to be vulnerable, and then finding other people who are willing to meet you in that vulnerability. But when you can find those people, that's an amazing thing, because they will start, especially if they know your fear archetype and they know you well enough to be able to see where you're letting those things hold you back. I have had that happen. I'm lucky enough, and in fact, I talk about this in the book a little bit. I have what I call my truth club of three fellow entrepreneurs and myself, and we have a little peer mastermind group, and we meet monthly via Zoom, and then we meet in person about 3 or 4 times a year to just spend time together, mastermind, help each other with our businesses, and work through any issues that we're having. And we do hot seats and that kind of thing. But I've been doing this work for a couple of years now with the assessment and the fear archetypes. And so they've been very involved in that process, and we all know each other's fear archetypes. And a few months ago we met, and ironically, I didn't realize how much my fear archetype, which is the outcast archetype, had been impacting my own business and my own life. And because as an outcast, what I fear most is rejection. And so the way that often plays out for the outcast is that you will reject other people before you can be rejected in return. So you struggle with trust issues, you struggle with asking for help or delegating things. You feel this need to prove yourself and the need to do everything yourself. And that's exactly what I was doing, but to my detriment. And one of the ways that I was not willing to ask for help or not willing to put myself out there was in pitching myself to media. I had this book coming out. So part of launching a book or launching something out into the world is to then put yourself out there and ask people for help and say, hey, will you help promote my book? Or will you have me on your show? And I was very unwilling to do that. And they called me out as my friends. They called me out right to the table. they laid it out there. And we had a very heated discussion because it's hard to get that kind of feedback, the kind of feedback that you need to get when people say, you know what, you are letting this hold you back and you need to stop it right now. And at the end of the conversation, they ended up challenging me to pitch. They said I had to pitch 20 people in 24 hours, and they weren't even going to let me make the list of names. They were going to make the list of people that they knew would reject me just so that I could practice being rejected. And that is exactly what I did. And I took their challenge, and honestly, it was a game changer for me because it opened up this reality for me that A, I was letting that fear hold me back, and that B, that fear did not have to control me, because once I could do it 20 times in 24 hours, it was no big deal after that.
And there's an important story in what you've shared, and I want people to really pay attention to something. As I led off before our conversation started, that you are a New York Times, a Wall Street Journal, USA Today best-selling author. Okay, you have had some incredible success with your work. You have a very successful podcast, but you're also a human being, and you have fears. And as successful as you are and have been, it still held you back on wanting to promote this book. That's and the reason why I'm highlighting this is because I know many people, no matter where they're at in the quote unquote whatever success is to them rung of things, they are oftentimes apprehensive about asking for help or asking to be on a show or reaching out to people. And wow, I mean, that's pretty bold for them to pick 20 people. And so, I mean, not that it matters, but this is just a curiosity for me is of the 20 that you did, how many actually did reject? About
17. Okay. But I had expected 100% rejection. So the fact that I got 3 out of 20 was actually really, 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 really good and hugely surprising. And, the outcast archetype is actually it's the 4th most prevalent archetype overall out of the general population, but it's actually the number 1 for entrepreneurs. So it's very common for outcasts to become entrepreneurs because of that, needing to prove yourself or feeling like you want to do it yourself, not wanting to work for other people, not playing nice in the sandbox. Like there's a lot of qualities that lend themselves to entrepreneurs. And so that tends to be, but as I talk to entrepreneurs, I definitely have seen how that plays out a lot. And a lot of times it's an ironic archetype because it kind of on the surface appears to be fearless. Outcasts can tend to seem like, oh, they're not scared of anything. They just go and they don't care what people think. They just go and do their own thing. But really where that comes from is this underlying fear of rejection that you might not even recognize until you have it pointed out to you. And I've talked to several people too, since I've been doing this work, who have had that experience of going, oh my gosh, I never even realized how afraid of rejection I was until I saw it laid out and I saw how these behaviors and you nailed it. Every single one of those behaviors was exactly what I was doing. And that's what I mean about the power of bringing it out into the light. Until you see it and actually identify it for yourself, it happens so automatically and so subconsciously that there's no way you would ever be able to change it because you just feel like it's part of who you are.
And even, what I led off with too about saying, I'm not a procrastinator. If I didn't read your book, I would navigate through the rest of my days thinking I'm not a procrastinator when that is actually something that is part of me. And it was definitely an awakening for me and, something that's like, okay, now I have some new homework to do and sort through it to strengthen my strengths and kind of reduce, some of the, these fears that, tend to pop up from time to time. So when I do something or I need to do something, I can recognize it immediately going, okay, this is a fear that I'm dealing with. Okay, let's utilize some of the tools that Ruth had laid out to help me get through this and get past it. And that's one of the things that is so amazing about this book. Now, besides this book, you do other things as well. So,
I
what are some of
do.
the what are some? So, yeah, it's like you just didn't just
A
write a
few
book.
things.
Yeah, just a few. I mean, it's like I'm trying to think, when in the world do you have time to write a book? But I know what that's like too. So what are some of the awesome things you're doing?
Well, so my company overall is called Ruth Soukup Omnimedia, and we have 4 different divisions within our company. So we have lifestyle, business, productivity, and motivation. And within each of those 4 divisions, we have a very distinct brand. So my lifestyle brand is called Living Well, Spending Less. And it's really all about providing practical tools for managing your home, getting food on the table faster, managing your budget so that there is more time and energy for all those other things. I serve an audience that is primarily women. I'm probably about 90% women these days and 10% men. And what I find for women specifically, especially women who are trying to go after big goals in their lives or start a business or get into entrepreneurship, what I find is that there's this struggle because you still have to get dinner on the table every night, and you still have to get the laundry done, and you still have to keep your house clean or take care of your kids. And and not to say that men don't do some of that stuff also, but I think even in our enlightened society, for the most part, the bulk of that responsibility still falls on women, or they feel like it falls on them. And so what I have found is that we have to focus there first in order to serve our audience. We have to focus on, here's how you can make your home run smoother and more efficiently. And you don't have to cook every meal organically from scratch. Here are some great easy recipes that are done in less than 20 minutes and that you can freeze ahead of time, so that you don't have to feel like you're spending all your time taking care of your home and never have any time for all the other stuff. And then the next piece of that is the productivity piece. We teach a time management system in our company called Think Big, Plan Small. I talk about it in Do It Scared. I talk about it with my blogging community. I talk about it at Living Well, Spending Less. So it sort of is very all encompassing because, of course, time management affects everything else that we do. And we have with that a planner that we manufacture and sell called the Living Well Planner. So we have sort of a company within a company. We have a planner company within a company. And then the business side of things, I've alluded to a couple of times. I have an online course that teaches how to create a successful, profitable online business. So it's a very step-by-step sequential program called Elite Blog Academy. And we've been doing that since 2014. I believe we opened the doors for EBA. And now we're on our 4th iteration of the course. We have I think 11,000 students now in 60 countries worldwide. And we've just seen phenomenal success with that specifically. And our students have gone on to create their own multi 6 and 7 figure businesses, which is really, really fun to watch. And to just see how that sort of expands and the impact that's had in the world. And then the final piece of all of this is the motivation piece, which is where Do It Scared comes in. So my podcast is called Do It Scared, and then this new book is Do It Scared. But what I've really realized is that you can't have one without the other. You can't have productivity and practical tools without also providing the motivation piece, because as humans, we all get frustrated and we all run out of steam, and we think, we get excited about a goal, and then all of a sudden life gets in the way and brings us down again. And we need that constant encouragement and motivation and accountability to actually get things done. And so I get really excited about talking just about the why and the motivation behind all of this other stuff. But I also love teaching people very practical step-by-step instructions that they can implement right away.
And there's synergies between all of those things that you mentioned, because one of the things that I see, and I work with people that are burned out and dealing with a lot of stress and whatnot, and time again it comes down to a time management issue. Sometimes they're a people pleaser and they don't know how to say no. They're trying to do too many things and work full time and then go home and prepare a meal that takes a couple hours to prepare, and not think things through and freeze ahead, or, even, cut up veggies and all the other things that can save, 5 or 10 minutes a night, that adds up really quick. And, real quick, you comment about, the pressures that women face when, they're working and they come home, and they're still, and this is coming from, my point of view in seeing my, my parents, because my mom and grandmother and great grandmother always worked. So, I saw how they did it, but it was a case of a teamwork type of thing where, both my, dad and grandfather and great grandfather and generations, everyone, had a role to help make things easier. It was a family related system type of thing. And as soon as the kids were able to help out without, a trip to the hospital, then you include them into the mix of things too. But that's the one thing that I encourage, dads, and this is more calling them out than anything, is, get involved. You're working full time, but, so is the mom. And if there's anything you can do to help out to ease, that burden, to make it a little bit easier and return to, family dinners, believe me, I think society desperately needs it. So I'm going to get off my soapbox now on that.
No, I know you could go down that. It's easy to go down that hole. And honestly, the research shows that even when both parents are working, and even when the wife is making more, that the vast majority of situations, the woman is still responsible for the bulk of the home and the domestic work, even when she's making more money than the husband. And that's just, it's sort of I don't know, it's a combination of a lot of different things. I think the way we grow up, but also for women, I think it's a lot of expectations that we put on ourselves to be able to be super mom and super worker and super everything. I think women have more than men. Men seem to be a little bit easier on themselves in that sense of saying, well, I'm not going to do that. I'm busy. I worked all day. I don't need to do anything else. And women have a really hard time doing that. So I think, yes, there are definitely societal changes that need to happen. But in the meantime, learning how to spend less time on some of those things so that you have more time to focus on the stuff that really matters to you, I think is the first essential step.
No, it's crucial, and definitely want to highlight that, and I'll put that stuff in the show notes. But more importantly, where can people find out more about you and the 18 billion things that you're doing, and all the awesome stuff you're doing?
Yeah, well, all of my sites are interconnected, so probably the easiest one to remember and the place where you can go and get more information about the fear archetypes and actually take the assessment is doitscared.com.
Awesome. And I'll have that in the show notes, folks. So Ruth, amazing book. Thank you so much for writing it and for all the awesome work you're doing, and, making a huge ripple effect on people and life and society as a whole. I think it's going to be an impactful book for several years to come. And I'm thankful that I was fortunate enough to have a copy and read it. And, and it's helping me, personally, coach myself in, becoming more aware of who I really am and the things they need to focus on for strengths, and just awareness on the things that can hold me back.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me.
Great to have you on the show. Until next time, everybody, be well.
Hey, it's Michael again. Thank you for listening to the podcast. I really appreciate it. If you're like many people, you're dealing with some significant stress and possibly approaching burnout. I know how you feel. In 2009, my burnout led to a year of worst-case scenarios. I do not want that to happen to you. If you go to breakfastleadership.com, you can register for a free webinar on burnout prevention, as well as get a free checklist to have successful mornings. Start off each day the right way. Again, that's at breakfastleadership.com. Also, since you are a loyal podcast listener, I'm asking you to like, rate, and review my podcast on iTunes. I look at all the reviews and appreciate your comments, and it helps other potential listeners discover the content I have on the show. I appreciate you, and thanks again for listening.